graduated, elevated. Now it's my time to shine, yeah, let's go. Major moves, power moves, take it to the top one time, non-stop.
No, I think that is something that comes up again. I don't know if you've seen on X where PhD students, that it is trending when it comes to mental health and having the work-life balance to a point whereby I received a message from, I'll say, one of my colleagues. She's in engineering actually, and the other one's in the labs, and they fell pregnant, and there was no understanding in terms of the department to assist them. And at the same time, they wanted to be anonymous because they didn't want the backlash, because, going on maternity, you need that time off. But the test tubes, they need to continue being tested, as you know. And they felt like they didn't have the support that they needed in order for them to remain relevant and also to be able to finish their research, essentially. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that, you've witnessed or?
Yeah, I mean, it still happens, sadly, to this day, and I think it's something that shouldn't happen. There should be definitely support mechanisms in place, and this is part of the ED&I thing, that actually, if you have to take time out of your studies, in the case you've mentioned, this person felt there was nothing there in place for them. There needs to be, and this is part of the work that we try to do, is to make sure that these systems and structures are in place so that people do feel supported. If you go on maternity leave for up to a year, I think it is, that you're allowed, then you should feel that somebody is there taking care of the job for you. They're not taking over, taking your job from you, which does happen. You come back to the job and you find out, oh, hold on, I'm not doing the job that I was doing before. And that still happens to this day. And I think those sorts of things need to be sorted out in higher education. But I also think that people should be allowed to take time out, and for it not to have a detrimental effect on their career. So some of the things that we're looking at doing in higher education now are being able to have a narrative. So the research councils now have what are called narrative CVs, which allow you to talk about your career trajectory. So you're able to actually embed career breaks into that. So if I look at a CV, for instance, say I looked at a CV for a postdoc, and I saw a student had only published so many number of papers, and there seemed to be a gap, at least then now there would be a narrative there to sort of say why. And then I would be like, okay, this person clearly couldn't have spent all their time on it because they had to take a time out. And I think you need more education and understanding from people like myself to see that. But I'm always keen to sort of get to know my students before I employ them, get to know what they've had to go through and everything, so that I can make those sort of informed decisions. And I think that's really important.
No, that's insightful. The challenge that I have is that if I'm going to say, for example, I took a break because I was stressed, I feel like I'll be stereotyped against, because then it's like, oh, this is a fast-paced environment. We need someone who can come in, hit the ground running. I feel like I'll be put to the side as a maybe. Do you think that creates another barrier, or no?
Well, no, I just think that mental health needs to stop being stigmatized in such a way, being seen as weakness. I think we are human, and we have to have the ability to take a break, particularly when it comes to the mind. And the mind the mind should be no different to any other organ in the body, right? If something goes wrong with your liver, something you lost the ability to walk, or it would be understood much better. If you had cancer or what any of those things, that would be really well understood. And unfortunately, we're still, I feel, in the UK and maybe in other cultures too, mental health is not, is stigmatized, and we might feel, maybe within our own cultures, we may feel like we have to, we've got, that we tell ourselves that it would be weakness to take that break. And what we need is the ability to be able to do that. So yes, I do think that it can be a barrier, but it's not your fault. It's the system's fault. Yeah, it's the system's fault, and that system needs to change, and allow people to be able to take that time out. So we have a centre for doctoral training at Bristol that I'm director of. I did forget to say that at the start, and we most definitely allow students to take time out for mental health, and it doesn't affect their studies. We will, almost certainly, extend their studies and also give them the financial backing as well to ensure that they can complete their studies. And I think that's what's needed as well. I think, universities are quite hard pushed financially at the moment. There's some big issues financially. Mental health is growing, but we need the funding from the research councils, from government, in order to address that. It isn't going to. It's not something that we can apply a sticking plaster to. It needs financial support.
Thank you very much for that. And I think the last question linking to maternity and breaks is that I had two colleagues who are here in the UK who again fell pregnant. There was no maternity policy in terms of the university for PhD students.
Yes.
And then they were told that you have to continue paying your fees because they were self-funding while they were on maternity.
Yes.
And had to then come back to finish their PhD. So you're already getting I think it's 200 and something pounds in terms of maternity from the government. What are your thoughts on that? Because that is, I would be stressed if that was me.
I don't think this is something that we should be doing. I think there has to be a maternity policy from the research councils for PhD students. It's not. I don't think it's a university thing. I think it's probably from where the money's coming from, which typically is from a research council for the PhD student. But we have to have something. In fact, we were discussing this only the other day because I'm part of a strategic advisory group for the research councils on ED&I, and this very issue came up about maternity leave for PhD students. So I think it's got to change. And PhD students have to be, they are the bedrock of our research. My biggest collaborators are my PhD students, and I couldn't do the research that we do without them. Why is it that they are not afforded the same rights as a member of staff? They should be. Almost certainly should be. And I know there's a financial penalty for that, but then the money has to be found from somewhere. So yeah, I think it's it's high time the system changed.
Well, how long is a piece of string, as they say?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think things can change, and they have changed, and it just requires, people like myself to collectively, with my colleagues, to get together to try and bring about change, and it does happen, but it does take time. But we have to sort of keep up the ante on the research councils and institutions as well to bring about that change.
No, going back again to the PhDs, We know that a lot of brown people, put it that way, English is not their first language. As actually, and some white people, let me, draw that line. So essentially, they're using ChatGPT to help them to write, because you have to publish 3-star, not 1-star, etc. The pressures, and they want a job. What are your thoughts with the governance on ChatGPT and using AI tools to help ourselves to articulate ourselves so that we can publish as well and we can be on the same playing field as everybody else?
Yeah, I mean, this is my personal opinion. So I think ChatGPT and AI tools are there to be used with some discretion. I mean, obviously, if you've used it, there are quite a lot of journals now that are quite happy to accept something that's been written or partially written by ChatGPT or another AI tool, as long as you declare it. So I think, it's, we would, let's go back in time. Once upon a time, if I was writing something, say I was an international student and I didn't know the meaning for a word, I'd look in a dictionary, right? I would use tools, or I would use a thesaurus to find another word for whatever it was I was trying to describe. And, so I'd use tools. Now I just see AI tools like ChatGPT as being yet another tool. Now, they're not a shortcut to writing an academic research paper, but they give you an idea of where to start. So I use ChatGPT sometimes to just get my thought processes going, just to sort of get things, in the sort of right frame. But as long as I, rewrite that in my own words, I don't think there's a problem. So yeah, I think what the problem I have is with it is if people just use that and then just take that verbatim and then use it themselves. But if you're trying to learn the language, why not use the tools that are available? Absolutely.
No, thank you for that. So going back to racism, with racism, we all have understanding of what we think racism is. But often I find that, there is a difference in the sense of from a bullying and harassment perspective. Sometimes it's not racism. It's just that somebody's just creating a barrier for you because they don't like you. And it's not really racism. It's just that at that moment, maybe they are white, you're black, but they just don't want you to move on to the next level because they want that position too. So how do we educate ourselves in order for us to understand? Because I've worked in HR and I hate going to tribunal over race claims when you can clearly see that it's actually bullying and harassment. It's not a racial or claim, or we didn't up you up 15%. It's because you weren't performing and you're now saying, actually, you're racist to me. My manager's racist to me. I don't like them because they're white and I'm black. They didn't give me the opportunity. What are your thoughts on that? Because there is a reverse to it as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think it affects everybody. And I think all these forms of behaviour are unacceptable. Do I don't think we should think in a sort of hierarchy of unacceptable behaviour that just because it isn't racism doesn't mean that it isn't bad or detrimental. I think we should be creating cultures of respect, but mutual respect and understanding. I think that's where we need to sort of get to. So I'm very keen to sort of promote things where we learn from each other, and we try and work out a way of working together better. If I'm going to go to work, I want to feel respected. I don't want to be shouted at. I don't want to be, trampled on or, have the carpet pulled from underneath me. So I shouldn't, you know, I shouldn't expect to go to work to do that to other people. You know, now, you know, it's sometimes difficult, I think, if you've had a number of instances of racism against you, and you know for sure that it was because of the colour of your skin that somebody did those things to you, to actually, you know, be able to discriminate between what is and what isn't, you know, and I think, you know, that also has to be acknowledged as well. That and this is why racism is so corrosive, because it is so detrimental, not just to the person, and most importantly to the person that's on the receipt of it, but it's also detrimental to the workplace in the ways in which people are able to perform. Because if they're constantly having to, like, you know, they've got this sort of thing going on in their head, is it, isn't it, you know, that is just like, you know, and I've had this described to me by people of colour, you know, that they often just have this constant dialogue with themselves about whether it is or it isn't, and to be honest with you, it's just they describe it as tiring. You know, it's just a very tiring. I don't know what your experiences are in that respect, but it just seems to me that that's, you know, very tiring. What we need people to be able to do is to be able to reflect on their behaviours, to think, you know, why did they behave in such a way, and like I say, we need to get to a culture of mutual respect. We all have to work together. Yeah. We're all human beings. We all have to work together. We need some basic humanity within the workplace, I think.
I agree, you know, with what you said, and I guess, you know, the next question is the sins of yesterday, because what you find as well, I don't know if you've seen the trends whereby with us brown people, we're still angry with the sins of yesterday in terms of slavery.
Yeah.
And then you're having to battle, you know, not being the angry brown person, whether you're Indian or Caribbean or Black African or Black American, you know, you're having to fight against all of those social injustices in your head. But then again, that alters your behavior. And then people think you're not confident because you're not speaking out. And then people think you're not sharing your ideas because you got your line manager to check first before, you know, you say them out loud, because you don't want to be, you're walking on eggshells. I think that's the better line to describe it. You know, how do we move past that? I know there's people like yourself who are working on how can we make it better, but I always say some of the conducts and behaviors, they're just hard to manage. Like a person's very hard to read. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's no easy answer to this. I mean, yes, I mean, racism has its foundations in, like, you know, 300, 400 years of history. It's not an accident. It was developed, you know, and it's as society's changed, so has racism. You know, it just recreates itself almost as society progresses. I think we need more understanding. I think, you know, personally, I think in the workplace we need, you know, compulsory, not never mind mandatory, but compulsory. I don't really call it training, because I don't know whether that's what's needed, because that training can have a bad word unless it's, you know, embedded into the workplace. We need some programs that get people to embed this type of understanding into their working practices, so that they're aware that this is what you're going through, right? So they're aware that when you encounter situations, you might behave in a certain way because of this, and to be able to have honest and frank discussions about it. For you to be able to say, for instance, you come to your white manager, to be able to say to them, look, I've been really cautious of coming to you to this idea because I thought you might dismiss it, because, you know, I've had these experiences before when I've, you know, to be able to sort of say that, you know, openly and honestly, I think is really important. I think, that type of honesty in the workplace is needed. But of course, I recognise that that kind of exposes you, maybe.
Yeah, it does.
And emotionally, and you might not want to do that. You might be more guarded about that. And I just think that more understanding is required within the workplaces, and particularly from those people that have line management responsibility. I think that's where the pinch points are. When you have those people, they need to be able to reflect back, an openness that will understand how their staff work, and where they're coming from, basically. Does that answer the question? I mean, it's not an easy one to get, because it's these are difficult things to deal with, for the person coming, as you describe.
It is complex, because I think the word, when you said training, I always say education.
Yeah.
Because I think it's learnings more.
Yes.
That are required, because when you're learning, I think you have a choice to then change your behaviors and conduct, or stick to what you know.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to unlearn what you've learned, because racism is learned, and let's face it, it's learned from a very, very. A lot of people say, "Oh, it's too young to." Children in primary school are too young to learn about this. Well, black and brown children in primary school aren't too young to be on the receipt of racism. So why are young people of that age not able to learn about racism? This is embedded in our culture. It's in our advertising. It is everywhere. And somebody just recently said to me, well, the danger is that people see racism everywhere. Well, unfortunately, it is everywhere. It's not that they don't see it everywhere. It is. And unless you are able to see that and understand that, you're not able to understand how people work in the workplace, I think.
No. I always say the workplace is like a maze. And also at the same time, if you find them playing football, rather you play football instead of coming in with table tennis, because you'll be out. And also, if you're not in tune with your own conduct and behaviors, you may beg to differ. You may rub people the wrong way. So it's like going back to high school or to elementary school, reading the room and playing the same sandbox with everybody, but also knowing what your goal is.
Yes.
Essentially, I think that's why I agreed with your point, when we said, when you said basically that you're overexposing yourself if you share with your line manager, because again, they want to move up the ladder. They've got a successor in their head probably, and then now that becomes a weakness when they're speaking behind closed doors and being a sponsor or your non-sponsor, essentially. So it is a maze, in my opinion. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to deal with it. But you may beg to differ. I don't know.
No, I don't. I think you're right. I don't think there is a right or wrong way. I think professionalism in the workplace is key. I think academia. I mean, I'm not saying it isn't a professional. It isn't a profession. It is a profession, but sometimes I think it's so varied, the work you're doing, and there's so many interactions that you undertake that actually, that the level of professionalism that you require is never really. It's not really taught to you. I didn't get taught when I came to be an academic how I should conduct myself in different settings. And I had to sort of just work that out for myself. I'm not sure I've always got it right, but it is a total maze, and yes, and I very much take people at face value. I'm not, I try, but I also try to understand where they're coming from and understand what they're going through, and not assume what they're going through, but just understand that you know, if somebody behaves in a certain way towards me, I don't instantly think that they're having, you know, they're trying to slight me. It might just be because something else has happened that day, you know. And sometimes it's just incompetence as well. They just don't do something the way that it should be done, and because they haven't got enough time or whatever, you know. And we have to sort of, I'm going to boil it right down to this, right? I think we need more forgiveness. We need to, you know, if you go out, if you set out in your car, angry, you're driving, somebody doesn't let you in, like, you know, you can't, you know, you just can't like deal with the people around you. It's going to be a difficult job, right? But if you're prepared to give grace and allow people to let people in, and just accept that people make mistakes occasionally, you know, then it'll be a lot easier drive for you. Now that's easy for me to say, white man, you know, I'm not facing the roadblocks, you know, as well. I'm driving straight through those, you know. Even when there's a red light, I might drive through the red light, you know, not even notice it's there. So I do understand that there are different barriers along the way when going through my career. But I do think, you know, if people generally are more prepared to give a bit, then it would be a lot easier.
Lovely. Well, thank you. So we'll wrap that up and we'll move on to some questions that I've received from some PhD students.
Oh, right. Okay.
And the first question is, you know, when it comes to publishing, do I really have to publish and be a full-time PhD student? Is that necessary?
I think it's important. I think if in academia, I think it's important if you've produced a unique piece of work, then publication's important. I feel it is. It's not just a means to an end though, because it's not just about the publication. If you start, I always say to my students, I don't write papers to write papers. I write papers to try and understand the research. So actually the process of going through the writing of the paper is really important at each stage. So when you're writing the paper itself, you know, setting it out, you've got the context, so then you understand why your work is important. You've got the methodology, so then you're trying to work out whether you did all the right things or not, or whether you've got a bit missing. And then you've got the results, you know, the interpretation of those results, so all the data analysis, and then, you know, you're trying to make a judgment really on how effective the work has been, you know, from start to finish. And then you've got the conclusions, which really is, you know, trying to sort of demonstrate the importance and its relevance, you know, in the context of it in the wider field. And if in all that process you would have read all the relevant papers anyway, you know, so then it gives you sort of grounding in what's known already about the subject area. So rather than just thinking, you know, should I publish? No, what you should do, you should go through the process of publication. Then when you submit the paper, you'll get your referees' comments, your reviewers' comments, and then you'll get some feedback on the work. And that's really important for when you get to the Viva, you know, when you get to the PhD Viva and they ask you all those hard questions. But if you've been through that already, through the publications process, you'll be prepared for a lot of the questions anyway. So I think it's not that publishing is important, it is, but the actual process itself is really, really important.
So then to move on from that, the question that I have, should PhD students be judged by the number of journal articles that they publish successfully during their... No.
No, definitely not. No, there shouldn't be. And, you know, it's quite understandable why they might not have published anything. And you don't, in the UK system, you don't have to have published papers to get a PhD. And actually, you may have done a PhD where you found that actually something didn't work. but you're just finding out why it didn't work and the insufficiencies of the process. I only published one paper from my PhD thesis, one single one that was quite near the start actually of the PhD. I didn't publish anything after that because I subsequently found out that quite a lot of what I've been doing was not statistically significant, but I did a series of experiments to show that. And of course, that's not really publishable because it's like a sort of negative result, if you like. But no, I definitely don't think. And by the way, when we talk about PhDs and what we're judging them, we judge them on, the contribution to knowledge. What contribution to knowledge have they made? And is that contribution substantial? And that doesn't mean how many papers. It doesn't mean volume of work that's been produced. We don't weigh the PhD thesis. It's a judgment on from the expert examiner as to whether that's made a significant contribution to what we know.
Thank you very much. The next question is, in your opinion, having higher education in terms of a master's or a PhD or a DBA or a postdoc, does that break the poverty cycle in terms of my family? So you've got PhD students who are coming from India, for example, the sub-Saharan region or China. They want to be competitive in the market. They want to earn more to change their situations, or they're sending money back home to their family. And then you've got an Irish colleague of mine that I interviewed. He goes, "No, I'm poor, no, I don't." It's not working. So, and somebody as well in London said the same thing. She goes, "No, my husband's earning 30,000. He's done his postdoc. We can't afford to pay our mortgage." What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, pay isn't high enough. Yeah, no, it's not, and it's. But there are. I'm paid quite well, I think. Actually, I'm better off than my parents ever were. Much better off. So it's a good job if you get to sort of the higher levels of academia. But I recognise that early career researchers and people at the lower levels aren't paid particularly well, and could often be on precarious contracts, short-term contracts, part-time, fixed term. Yeah, it's the conditions for what I would call early career researchers are not particularly great in this country. So yes, and the answer is no, it wouldn't break the poverty trap, but unless you got to sort of the sort of higher levels. But then of course you've got to progress all the way up that as well. So it's I think if you want to be rich, somebody was saying at this conference, don't be an academic. But then somebody said, no, there's a way to do it, and she didn't actually explain how it can be done. But I do know some academics who've set up their own companies and they've sold them for millions. So there are ways to make money in academia. I haven't found them yet. I haven't found the way to make millions yet. But I mean, I appreciate that actually that accumulated wealth and being able to support families is really, really important. So I've had researchers before who left academia because of that, because they just couldn't get a mortgage, they can't support other family members based on the salaries that we pay them and the contracts that we give them. So, I think this has to be looked at quite seriously. Yeah.
No, I had somebody, I would say Newcastle to deter, but in that region, and he was on a 0-hour contract as an academic, and he was so stressed out. He came on the PhD Hard Talk Spaces asking for advice in terms of, do I stay or do I go? Because I've got a child and I need to pay my bills essentially, but I love what I do. I enjoy what I do, but the hours aren't consistent. And, he felt like he was neglected essentially by the institution. Just to add on to your point, but you'd be glad to know, because I know you're busy, this is the last question.
No, go on.
So you agreed to come on PhD Hard Talk. You don't
Yes.
know me. What made you say yes? And is PhD Hard Talk beneficial for the research community, or do I call it a day and just finish it off?
No, I wanted to support this initiative. I think we need to talk more. I think you know, I didn't want to just come on and express my opinion. You know, although I do like to talk, as you probably gathered. But
Yeah.
but you know, I think these sorts of things are really important. I would like to sort of encourage, you know, all the listeners of PhD Hard Talk, encourage PhD students. Maybe you're going through a difficult time. Maybe it's, you know, you're having serious doubts about academia, but it's a wonderful career, you know. So I would, you know, and encourage you to think about, you know, looking over the horizon and into that career. But you know, if you are experiencing difficulties and so on, you know, there are people out there to help, you know. So reach out and you know, I'm always happy to communicate with a student that needs some advice and support. Oh no, I've opened the door. I'm going to get a deluge now. But you know, I think it's really important to have these conversations. So yeah, that's why I to.
Thank you very much. So if you do want to get in contact with Prof. Steve, his details are at the bottom below. If he doesn't respond, he's a busy man.
That's true. Thank you for that disclaimer there, because yes, I can't promise to I can't promise to solve people's problems, but I can promise to listen. And sometimes you just need someone to listen.
No, lovely. And also, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. And if you want a part 2, do let us know in the comments as well, and we'll have a part 2. Thank you again for your time and for being a guest on PhD Hard Talk.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Noma.